Well, going back on something that I mentioned earlier, I think incentivizing local business in general is the best way to encourage members of the 61st Precinct and anywhere else to shop at Somali-owned businesses, to shop at any locally owned business. Whether that would be through an incentive to the employer and shop owner to hire employees, or maybe restructuring the way sales tax is administered in those stores. So if you're shopping somewhere at a locally owned business versus shopping at, say, Target or Walmart, you're maybe paying less in sales tax. And little things like that could make a huge difference to a small business owner whose overhead margin isn't nearly as dismissible as someone large like Target or Best Buy.
I've run a small business for the past few years, and I can tell you it's incredibly challenging and a very difficult process. And right now, the way we have our system structured is actually, it's really difficult to kind of take that initial leap and have that support, especially in the first few years. The real big things that we need to do is we definitely need to increase access to small loans for smaller businesses, especially when you are a new arrival to this country and credit is a much more difficult thing to achieve. Making easily available loans is a huge aspect to allowing people to be able to start up small businesses. I thought the sales tax idea is a fantastic idea too, by the way.
So I have shopped at Carmel Mall, and I was at the opening of the mall that is on Cedar, right in our district, at Cedar and Lake. I have developed a very good relationship with the African Development Center, and many of you guys know Hussein Samatar is the director, one of our school board members, at looking at the various ways in which people can start their small businesses. So often we start them really small in a small kind of cubicle area, and then have them continue to grow. So I think the state does have a way in which they can play through the Department of, through DEED, making sure that organizations like the African Development Center and other business growth entities in the community can get the grants that they need. We can work on some of the tax credit issues that will allow them to grow. And I think that those are the ways that we can help. The other thing is, I think that we have a willing movement. We have the ability to send people to the Carmel Mall. We have the ability to send them to the 26th Street Mall, right? We can tell them what happens here, and we can kind of demystify this idea that a souk or a mall is a place that only Somali people can go, but it is a cultural opportunity for people to go in and shop. So I do think that we have those great opportunities as a state center.
Thank you. It's a very good question. Small business enterprise. District 61 has a lot of small businesses, and I patronize them. When I was working at Children's Hospital, we always use the souk for catering for a lot of the events that we have. I think one of the things that as a senator, we need to make sure a lot of the businesses in our district can qualify for the DBE, that's the Disadvantaged Business Enterprise, but very few people access it or know about it. Small businesses cannot compete with the big businesses because of the requirements. So one of the things that we need to make sure is that the small businesses can access small business loans at low interest, but also that they get support in terms of how to run a business, how to figure out what are some of the qualifications or the requirements so that they could qualify for those, not only the small business loans, but also technical assistance. That's what we need to make sure that small businesses can continue. There's a very high rate of failure, not because they're not hardworking, but because they don't have the technical assistance and the small business assistance. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a very good question. A candidate who's a pro-business, which I consider myself, and somebody who has an office in one of those two malls, I have seen very closely thousands and thousands of people, those two malls employees. And you know, we know that the 2/3 of job growth in this country is created by private sector as a whole in this country. What we have to do that is we must make those small businesses loans available to them. So the Small Business Administration, the federal government, and our local and state government, all the grants should be available to small businesses so they can go and get the loans they need. So that's what we need. We have to give incentives because those two malls, and also it's the same thing that goes by other communities in District 61. The people in my district, the jobs is number one, and they are very concerned about it. The way to create jobs and to spur the economy is to give the small businesses a tax credit they need so they can come and invest our communities. And this will lower unemployment. This will have a wide-ranging effect in our economy. We need to bring business to District 61. That's what I need. I'm a candidate for pro-business. That's who I am.
Thank you. Question number 5 deals with legislation and specific procedural maneuver. The question is, what specific state senatorial procedures and rules would you apply to prevent bad proposals that could have a detrimental impact in the Somali constituency in Senate District 61 that could prevent becoming a law? Chris?
I'll just need one moment here.
Sure.
I don't understand that question.
The question is what specific state senatorial procedure do you think you would apply to prevent bad proposals becoming a law? For instance, in the last session, a English-only proposal was proposed, but through the process, it was prevented coming out of the House. Chris?
Yep. When regarding legislative procedure now, because I don't have hands-on legislative experience, I can't speak to all of the different procedures that could be used, but one would be to essentially try to kill that procedure in committee before it even gets to the floor of the Senate. Beyond that, depending on how much support was available to filibuster, that is another option that is available to try and basically not allow that particular legislation to ever come to a vote. Those two procedures, I think, would be the most effective means to prevent any sort of discriminatory legislation to ever be enacted. Also working with the American Civil Liberties Union and other community organizations that could organize a large community response to any sort of legislation that could be considered discriminatory is another way to help impact the decision makers from a grassroots standpoint.
Thank you. Okay.
So one of the few areas I do have a little bit of experience in is actually in Robert's Rules of Order and Parliamentary Procedure, so a little bit better at that. But as was said before, I mean, the biggest one I would do is I would just, if it was really going to come down to a vote, I would filibuster that bill and I would sit up there and read the phone book if it's necessary, just to make sure bad legislation doesn't get passed, or at least someone's voice is heard in regards to bad legislation. That would probably be the biggest one I would guarantee you doing under any circumstances.
So I think the first thing that you need to do and think about is to be in the majority, right? Is to control the process.
It's easy to
Right.
set the agenda when you're the majority.
Well, absolutely.
Right now, the DFL is in the minority.
Absolutely, but I wanted to say that because I think that it is important that as we go out and vote, that we can continue to vote so that we're in the majority, so it is much easier to control it. I think the other thing that we have to do when you talk about legislative maneuvers, you know, in the House we use Masons, we use the you know, the custom and usage. These are just kind of all things that we use in order to try to prolong the debate or to try to make sure that the law that they have proposed is legal. So I think one of the things we have to do is we have to argue about it in the committee, and we have to try to bring as many people like yourself to testify, to tell them kind of the errors of their ways, and that if it does make it through the process and it ends up on the House floor or on the Senate floor, then we do have to talk about it. This idea that we operate like they do in Washington where we can read the Constitution, that doesn't work very well. We have rules. I was on the Rules Committee in my first term where we can actually call the question. So we can actually kind of call the question and ask to end the debate and then actually take the vote. And that has happened. It didn't happen last year, but it happened in my first 2 years. So I think the best thing that we can do is to make sure that the community understands that, and that we do a lot of the work to make sure that legislators know, for instance, how discriminatory Representative Tchaikovsky's English-only bill was.
I was a registered lobbyist a few years back, so I know a little bit about the system, and I want to acknowledge my former representative, Karen Clark. I used to live in that district, and one of the things that I admired about the work that she had done in terms of legislative procedure was we were notified. She was always present, and I will always be present to make sure that those proposals does not go any farther than they need to. I think it's also important that that supporters are there in the from the community to lobby and also to educate other legislators, and also the community to call on forums or town meeting, community meetings, so that people are informed about what is going on in the legislative process, so that not one of those things that all of a sudden you wake up one morning and a bill just passed, and that has never happened. And I want to thank my former Representative Karen Clark. She was always on top of things, and I want to make sure that if I'm there, I'm also going to be on top of things.
Thank you.
That's a very good question, Jamal. The way to prevent bad bill is use all maneuvering, legislative maneuvering to prevent it, filibustering, all kind of things. But let me make one, for example. Last year, the Republican legislature passed voter ID requirement. And we were lucky that we had a DFL governor who vetoed that bill. I just want to make one of the examples. We had a divided government, and we were lucky, so the governor vetoed, and it did not become law. Because Minnesota, we are very proud to always lead the nation when it comes to high turnout of the voters. Always we average higher than the nation. So the way to prevent bad bills to come to the law is to make sure that you did not reach the Senate floor or you didn't reach the House floor. May also build coalition. We have to also make sure that we can work the other side of the aisle. Always very important that, as a DFL, I will make sure that I have a good working progress to the other side of the aisle, whether Republican, so we can always get the job in our district. And also make sure that we have a common sense approach to solve our problems in our state.
Thank you.
This is kind of an arcane question, and the reason I asked I didn't understand it is because I think the general public doesn't understand a lot of the maneuvers that go on at the state capitol. They're offended by the fact that bills are finally once and for all in something called a conference committee at 3 a.m. in the morning. That's when things are stripped out of a bill. That's when important things are put into a bill. It's pretty hard to mobilize a coalition at 3 a.m. in the morning when people are sound asleep. People are offended by that, but we talk about filibusters, and I think a filibuster is a tool that can work for you and against you. And the question Representative Hayden continues to duck is why he participated in a filibuster, unlike other members from his district, Karen Clark, to ensure that NRP lost $2 million of allocated funding. That NRP funding is a great benefit to this community. And I think it's time for Representative Hayden to tell us why he participated in that filibuster that would ensure that NPR lost $2 million in funds and Representative Clark did not. Perhaps he can answer that question.
Yeah, I should answer that.
I started it, so.
Well,
So I'm not quite sure where Ms. Wills is getting her information. I'm looking at Representative Clark. So I was on the NRP bill. I was on the bill that would have stopped the city from taking the money from the NRP program and putting it into their general fund. I don't know what filibuster people are talking about. We can watch the tape. The last day of session is what I saw somebody talk about. There was a long discussion actually between GOP folks about the legacy fund, and they had problems with each other about that issue. I didn't speak that day. I wasn't up on the House floor that day because it was an issue that I wanted the Republicans to talk about and to argue about open meeting laws and things of that nature. And I look at Representative Clark because she was on the bill, and that I was always on the bill, and that the bill sat in the General Register for about 2 weeks, but there wasn't any filibustering for me, and I didn't speak on that last day, and I was actually a co-author on the bill. So I'm sorry that you were misinformed and that those were misinformed about that issue. And this is on the record, so we can go and watch the tape. If we had 6 hours worth of time, we could watch it, and you could find that not only was I supporting the bill and trying to figure out a way to get it done, working with Representative Clark, but I never spoke that day.
Thank you. I think that brings up to our last question, and we're going to start with Kyle Wilson here, and it relates to state government participation. Minnesota has the highest Somali population in the nation, and to our knowledge, there is no Somali with a significant post in our current state government. So the question is, what would you do to encourage the nomination and the appointment of Somalis to state offices by the executive branch?
Appointments, you said?
Appointments and nominations.
And nominations. Appointments and nominations, I mean, I think you just really have to judge people by their merits. I mean, when you're dealing with a lot of issues that directly affect the Somali community, I mean, there's going to be the most experience coming from there and people that can directly address those issues. I don't think you need special rules for that. You just need smart wisdom. I guess it's pretty much all I have.
So the appointments process is the executive branch's opportunity to appoint people to boards throughout the state. So one of the things that I have done and that will continue to do is to engage the Somali community and all communities to participate in that process, to recruit folks that we think have the ability and have the experience in which to do that, to be part of that process. I'll tell you guys today, Nimco is here. She's my campaign manager. We work awfully hard to have a diverse campaign. We work awfully hard. I would like him to say that I'm helping to develop her because she's really developing me as a much better candidate. But those are the kinds of things that I think that we have to continue to do to bring all people into our campaigns, into our office. Many of you know when I've gone on a national night out, I have 4 different languages that I use in which to talk to people, and Somali is one. And so I just think we have to continue to work closer with all communities, and in particular, make sure that when we have really, really good people in your community that want to participate, or just have the desire, that we actually work with the executive branch in which to do so.
Appointments is one of those executive decisions that happens. But I think from my perspective, it would be very important that we create a pipeline of talents so that when opportunities happen, that we can make a recommendation to make sure that the Somali talents are included in that pool. I mentioned earlier that we need to make sure that the community, that everyone in the community has a voice in our system. There are a lot of talented people in the community, but we don't know a lot of them. And so part of the work that needs to happen is to begin the pipeline, a data bank of talents, so that when opportunities come, we are ready. We're not caught with not knowing who to recommend. And I think there's all that opportunities that, in my personal life, I've always hired looking at diversity, so that I would continue to do.
Thank you.
That's a very wonderful question. The District 61 has changed, and our government has to reflect that change. That's the truth. So what I will do that is I will recommend actually that our District 61, that why I think I'm running. I'm running because I believe that the district has changed, and there's a lot of change that reflect our district. So I'm a kind of new kind of leader who believes that I can bring all the people in my district, show them that we are a diverse district that welcomes everybody, and also addresses the economic difficulties that many families are facing our district. Many people lost their houses. When I ran last year, it was a historic run. I remember that talking to the people, and they tell me that many families lost their houses, and they don't know what the future holds for them. So I will make sure that we develop talents, whether it's Somali Americans or any other community or my district, develop talents and appoint appropriately. So merit, I believe merit based on system, that you appoint somebody because of their merit, not based on because their gender or their race. And merit based on system, that's what I believe.
I think the Somali American, or the Somali American Youth Health Office is one of the many organizations in District 61 that can establish a talent bank. I think that's an excellent idea. As far as I'm concerned, Senate District 61 has a tremendous amount of talent, not just in the Somali community, but I think with organizations like this, and the Somali American Business Association and other Somalian organizations, those kinds of organizations will go a long way towards simply nominating people and making those people's names known to your state representative and to your state senator, so that when the time comes for the appointment process, we can take that information forward to the executive level.
Thank you.
I think when considering executive appointments, it is apparent to me as a prospective representative of the Somali community that it would be in my best interest to look at a very active community, to find the leaders in that community, to suggest to Governor Dayton or to any of his predecessors people who I feel would be well qualified to serve as any executive appointment. To not recommend someone for that particular appointment and to just sit idly by as other appointees are coming through for confirmation through the Senate and the House would be generally irresponsible.
Thank you. I've been told we're being very efficient with our questioning and with our answers, so we're running a little bit of ahead of time. So it's been recommended that we allow the audience 1 or 2 questions if there is